we have to talk basically about is autism something, a problem that you have, or is it a character? Is it a trait? Is it just a way of being? And I feel like I'm really a little bit torn on it, but on the other hand, I'm pretty decided as well. So I feel like we all have autistic traits within us. So there is a bunch of categories, a bunch of like character traits that every person, I think, has to a certain extent. And then when you put like a lot of these together, then at some point you would talk about an autistic person, I feel like. So
yeah, but
so,
that's also why we so clinically we do make the divide of like, do you qualify for a diagnosis?
exactly.
Or are you autistic subclinical, like
Exactly.
not meeting the criteria for a
Yes.
diagnosis?
Yes.
And here's the thing.
But yeah.
I make the distinction, and so does the DSM, so do diagnostic systems, really, based on not how obvious are the symptoms of autism, but does the person suffer because of it?
Yeah. And that would make it a disorder or something that you have, right? Like an issue that you have or a disorder.
Usually, so I don't know how many professionals agree with me on this, but as an autistic psychologist, what I see is that generally speaking, we don't suffer because of the autism. Sometimes we will suffer because of sensory processing differences, or we will suffer from like social overload. But generally speaking, the things that make us suffer is not being in an environment that takes care of our needs as people.
I feel like that's exactly the question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if, for example, if you have a gay person that is like living in the 60s and is like really suicidal, then you would be like, yeah, it's kind of obvious that that person is suicidal because they can't express themselves and they cannot live like they want to live and stuff like that. It's normal that you get depressed. Yeah. So, but then when I hear, I'm not really yeah, maybe. Okay, so but then I for example, I hear stuff like sensory overload and also so really high forms of depression that go along with it, and also like other comorbidities where it's not really sure if it's caused by society or not. So the question would be, I asked that to one of my guests, if there would be a planet with just autistic people that would be perfectly accommodating for all of autistic needs, would that be a society without basically any autistic suffering? What do you think about that?
I don't think we can eliminate human suffering.
Not completely, but it's human suffering caused by autism, by everything that we call autism right now. So sensory overload, would that be possible to just create a world that is like so so would be not that stimulating? I feel like it's really hard to imagine.
I feel that that would require talking about autism as a monolith, as one thing. And for me, from what I know of autism and autistic people, is that we tend to fall into extremes. So our sensory profiles, our social needs, our social profiles, our expressions fall into extremes. And that means, I see this actually in classrooms. So we have, in my country, we have classes in high school that they're called autism lines. So you will go, you will join a class to go through high school, and everyone in that class will be autistic. And the issue for me with that is like autistic people don't necessarily do well with one another because we're not all the same, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, some of us will need to fidget a lot in order to learn. Some of us will need to stim in class in order to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
Others need to have their environment perfectly still in order to absorb information. Um, and likewise, in a social setting, some of us are very happy in loud settings. Like I know autistic people that enjoy going to nightclubs. They don't necessarily, enjoy it when it's so crowded that they can't avoid touching people all the time. But they might enjoy the fact that the music is so loud, or they might enjoy the sensory stimulation of the lights, things like that. Whereas others only feel comfortable being social in a setting that is quiet. Maybe it's one-on-one, a parallel activity, no eye contact, no physical touch, etc. So I think that when we're trying to create a society that is accommodating to everyone, that means recognizing that people are individuals,
Which is
even if they have the same diagnosis.
but that makes it quite kind of difficult to make it accommodating, right? Because like if you're thinking about designing a metro station which is accommodating
Yeah.
to everyone, like, or to autistic people, let's say, okay, we have a new budget. The Senate is like dropping money to make the
Mm.
metro stations more accommodating. We kind of have to find some like stuff that we can directly fix, just like maybe, I don't know, wheelchair accessible metro
Yeah,
stations,
but
something.
there are some things that we can do.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily perfect, but I mean, everything about the human experiment of, living together in societies that are as large as they are,
Mm-hmm.
um, everything about that is continuously learning how to do this,
Mm-hmm.
right? So one of the things that we are definitely learning is that placing quiet rooms, placing accessible quiet rooms in schools, in the train station, whatever, um, that would be helpful to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Not just autistic people, by the way, but a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, having a box of fidget toys in a large store that you can just grab.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, some people will take advantage of things like that and will misuse the accommodations that are made available. They will abuse them in some way. That will happen. But for the vast majority of people, it will be helpful, and they will be thankful for it, and they will use it respectfully.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And I don't think that people abusing something makes the solution bad or something. It doesn't
No.
really have any effect. But just to get back to so what would have to be like, what would be, I guess I'm still having a little difficulty with the separation between trait and mental illness, or not mental illness. I don't want to call it mental illness, but
Mm.
like disability. Let's call it
Mm.
disability, for example. So what's the
Ah,
difference? What's the difference between a trait and a disability? So when would you talk about a trait, and when would you talk about a disability?
yes.
Yeah.
So something, uh, there are different models of disability that we talk about theoretically. Um, there's a medical model that says, okay, we've now defined this problem. Now it is something called a disability, and it is something to be cured. Okay. But there are many disabilities that don't really arise as disabilities until they are faced with the problem. So a sensory processing difference isn't a disability until you meet the sensory input that you can't cope with. Up until that point, it's a trait. And in that very situation where you meet the sensory input that you cannot cope with in that particular situation on that particular day, in that situation, it's a disability.
Sure, but
It's a
wouldn't that
disability.
make being gay a disability in the moment where you're being I don't know, harassed, because of some homophobic person? In that moment where you basically suffer from your trait,
No,
doesn't make it.
no,
I don't feel like it makes it a
no, because
disability directly.
when something, like when someone else is doing someone to you,
Hmm.
that is not your disability.
But what about the sensory overload? Couldn't like one person do like, we just
No,
compare
that's
these two
called bullying.
situations?
That's
No,
called
not.
bullying. That's different.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
And I feel
using.
like, yeah, I feel like with that definition, bullying would cause a disability on that other person. I don't feel like that makes a lot of sense.
So that is, I mean, yeah, okay, so words are difficult. What I would say is that if you know that someone has a trait that in some situations is a disability, and you create a situation for them where that trait is a disability,
Yes,
that is bullying.
I agree.
That is harassment. That is,
100%. Yes.
yeah. Um, but to me, it's not saying that this isn't hard.
I
It,
just
it's
mean that it feels
so
weird to say that it's possible for a bully to create a disability in another person. I feel like that's not.
no, it's not creating a disability. So it's creating a situation in which something is a disability,
Hmm.
right? So I think it's something to do with how I interpret the word disability.
Hmm.
To me, a disability means that this is an ability you don't have,
Hmm.
or that is very hard for you,
Hmm.
right? So someone can be blind, or they can, have very reduced vision. And that is a disability in situations where you need to see and where there are no other prompts to guide you through the world. But as long as you're in an environment where you can use your strategies to get through physically the environment and get to whatever you need, then is it a disability?
Sure,
Um,
that's exactly the distinction I would like to do. I think that's a really good
mm,
point that you're making. So what I think like the difference between like something like that is that if everybody would be blind, then it
mhm,
wouldn't be a different disability. So if we would give up
mhm,
all of the activities or
right.
in other words, if we would give up all of the activities that require vision,
Mhm,
this disability would not be there anymore. But the problem is, the rest of society, would miss out on a lot of activities and would
yeah.
miss out on a lot of like beneficial stuff. And I feel like with being gay, that there is no stuff that we have to give up that is beneficial to society, that makes that stops hurting gay people. So we can. Do you see my point?
Mhm,
But I feel like with especially certain forms of autism, where for example, so you talked about group work in one of your videos,
yeah.
where for example you said that it's really difficult for you to work with more than one person, and that one person has to be somebody that you trust. I feel like it would be one of the. I think it would be a big thing to give up group work as a
Of
as a
course.
society.
And
So
frankly, other people would find themselves with a disability if they did not have access to group work.
exactly, yeah, that's a really good
So
point.
for me, it's simply a point of saying human beings are different. And as far as we can, why not just try to accommodate each other? You know,
Yeah.
everyone is better off if we try to make everyone's environment as accommodating to them as we can.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that the world is going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that we're never going to have sensory meltdowns or social overload or any number of other things, but it does mean that maybe we can reduce the amount of times when a person is confronted with that.
Mhm. So, is there even a merit to calling something a disability in general? Like, for example, so the idea of disability always implies like a minus, like as if somebody has a
Mhm.
minus. And I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of the discussion within autism is about, yeah, there is some minuses in one areas, but we have some pluses in other areas, which is true.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's also not true for all autistic people. So you hear a lot of times people say stuff like, I'm autistic, but not in the Rain Man smart way. I'm just having really hard time talking to people. And
Yeah.
I feel really bad for that, because there is this expectation put on autistic people to be like really good in math, which is like completely
There
wrong as
is
well.
there are definitely some stereotypes out there that we are expected to fall into. Um,
But is there a
and
merit? What do you think? Is there a merit in
the
should we
word
just,
disability,
yeah, should we just, I think there is an
to me,
merit to it.
the only thing that the word disability does in the autism world, at least,
No, I mean in general.
I'm not enough of an expert in every kind of disability, in every kind of trait that we talk about as a disability, to generalize completely.
Hmm.
I fear that I would make a mistake if I talk about all disabilities. Um,
Hmm.
but what I perceive in autism, and with many of the diagnoses that I work with that are related to autism, such as ADHD, you know, um, certain learning disabilities. Um, what it does right now is that when it is defined as a disability in the law, it gives you access to support.
Hmm.
And that to me is the only real benefit that there is.
Not also, for example, societal like empathy and acceptance. I feel like that's, I mean, I
But
think
I feel like there are other words and there are other ways of thinking that could do that.
like this idea of having a minus, like having, for example, like with people that sit in a wheelchair, for example, I I I see like a lot of social issues
Mhm.
that have big impacts on people's lives do not get the same acceptance as, for example, people that sit in a wheelchair. For example, people are way more ready to give a big budget for wheelchair accessibility, but not as much with social issues, which can be like, which are also really like important and can also
Mm.
hinder a person's life. I think that this idea of disability is pretty strong in.
In some sense, yes. But again, it's to do with laws and economics and committees that have to sit around discussing things they generally won't have any personal knowledge of. Um, in my way of viewing the world, I don't see why we have to talk about deficits in order to make accommodations. Um, so I obviously work mostly with teenagers and young people who are in school, and so a lot of the accommodations that they need has to do with the classroom, sometimes with their living environment, with supports to get to their education or to just get through daily life, right? And I see that in order to get the bag of money to have a support person or to have someone available to drive you to school every day, we have to find some way of communicating to whoever allocates those money that this person needs that. Okay, great. But accommodation wise, in my personal philosophy, I don't see why someone has to have a piece of paper that says disability or disorder. To me, it could say condition or trait
I feel like
or
condition would be kind of the
accommodation needs.
same, but
But it's
trait
but
trait
it's
would,
it's
but
it's
this
not
I
though.
but isn't
It's
like
semantics, definitely. We're
uh,
arguing semantics.
no, I'm not sure, because I believe in like making society as equal opportunity as possible, to a certain
Mhm.
extent also equal outcome, but
Yeah.
that's only possible like if you want to ameliorate a situation, you have to basically prove the deficit in order for that that social equality generating state slash system to get the legitimacy to be legitimized to basically do something about it. There needs to be a proof of deficit, basically, I think, in order for that social justice idea to get into effect.
With how things currently work, yes. But I don't, as a person, I don't understand why it has to work the way it does.
Okay.
I wish it didn't.
Okay. I can't really. Yeah. Okay. All right. I accept that answer.
No, I absolutely know that it's wishful thinking, and I know that there are a lot of people that absolutely cannot be convinced that we should view autistic people, since we're here talking about autism, there are a lot of people that can't be convinced that we should view people, autistic people, um, as just a different way of being human and and perfectly equal in every other way, in worth, in value, but that also we should get accommodations.
But I mean, not
But
only
that
from.
is,
Yeah.
I think that the issue is that a lot of people don't understand that there are many things that aren't considered accommodations that actually are. In in my perception, every person needs accommodations. There is no one who does not have accommodation needs, who does not have support needs. It doesn't exist. It's just that there is a majority that get by on somewhat the same support needs. And then we've defined that as not support needs, and everything else
Sure,
is a
but
support need or accommodation.
there is a threshold for when we as society have to intervene, right? So let's say I have two children, and
Hmm.
these two, I know that one is like really bad at socializing but really
Hmm.
smart, and I feel like it kind of equals out, like I'm like, yeah, it's not a big deal. He will have his difficulties in some areas, but it will be fine, and it will overcompensate in other areas. Then I don't have
Hmm.
really the need to intervene and to give some special. I'll just think that it pans out. But once I discover that there is a deficit there, I have to intervene in order to, like, I have to acknowledge that deficit in order to say, okay, I have to intervene here. This is not just a trait. In order for that child to have equal opportunity, I have to do something about it, and I can't do that without acknowledging that there is a deficit, right? How would I do that before that? If
But
it's
what
just a
support
trait.
needs does the other child have? What support needs are being met for the other child that aren't being acknowledged as support needs?
Not
right?
enough, not big
I mean,
enough that I would see them in that, so that I would be aware of them. So I see
yeah,
that
so
he's
the other child's support needs is already being met by the way society works.
sure,
I
yeah,
think I think one
yeah,
of the
yeah, yeah.
big things we learned during COVID is that a huge support need for many neurotypical people is constant physical social interaction, right?
But I
That
would
is a
not.
support need for them.
I agree. That is
If they
something
don't
that
get it,
I agree. I
they
agree.
have a disability,
But we are what we are talking about is basically interventions, right? Intervening. So everything that
right?
you do out of the ordinary, which you do for extra, like everything that you do extra, right? So everything that you don't do for everyone, that is not the average need. Everything that you do that it goes beyond that average need.
But I
Th-
don't think anyone is average.
No, but we need.
I think
Wait,
there are
how is
just people
everybody
that
not average?
survive.
Like most
I
people are by
I
definition
think that
average, right?
there are people that get by and whose potentials and deficits don't get explored because they somehow manage to fake it until they make it. And that is true for a lot of people. And for some people, their cognitive abilities, their social abilities are just a little bit further outside of that big box of people who somehow get by without having their support needs met in more specific ways. But I don't think that that necessitates thinking of it as a disability. To me, it's what is a challenge for you? What is a strength for you?
Do you think it's fair
And
that they give the same amount of money to accommodate a neurotypical person without any problems?
I
Uh,
think it's possible to accommodate and include most children in the same classroom if we just did it right.
okay.
I no, I really do. I really do.
I agree,
I
I agree, but that kind of a little bit begs the question, because like doing it right is exactly what I'm basically asking for, right? Because I'm
okay,
basically
well,
asking what is doing it right. So which child do we have to care about? Do we have to? We can't
all
just
of them.
give the same. Yeah, but we
All of
is
them
it okay?
individually
Then you would say
at the same time.
is it fair to give the same amount of money, to spend the same amount of money on the kid that is not having any social issues, who is good in school,
Yes.
who has no problems? Do you think that's fair? I don't think that's fair. That's not a.
No, no, but I think it's because we think of the problem in fundamentally different ways. So for me, the classroom that includes everyone, or at least very nearly everyone, it doesn't actually allocate money to each individual student. It allocates money to the school. It allocates money to the environment to make the environment actually inclusive, to make sure that the classes are small enough, to make sure that there are enough teachers, that they are well educated enough, to make sure that there are different sensory environments available, to make sure that the scheduling is flexible enough, to make sure that all
But
kids get food. You know, I think it's a fundamental question of we don't invest enough money in children.
we don't have infinite money, right? We always have a limited amount, no matter how
Yes,
big it is.
and
No
we
matter how big it is. Like, let's say
use
we
them
have a
wrong.
huge. Yeah, we do use it wrongly. But the problem is, you've said it yourself. Not even among autistic people, there is. We can just create a perfect classroom that would accommodate all of the autistic.
Not for everyone,
Yeah,
but
so we have to think
most.
about where
Most.
we spend the money. So an autistic child would profit from a small class by, I don't know, 50 to 60% increase in productivity and in like being able to succeed in school. But a not
Well,
neurotypical child in well-being, but a neurotypical child would profit maybe only 5% from that, but would extremely profit from cafeteria food or something like that, right? So
I'm
so how do we distribute that money? What's fair? And I feel like the only fair way to do it is to allocate it proportional to the amount of deficit and problems that these children have? Like what else could we use as a metric to determine how we allocate this money?
So I'm going to tell you about a school that I went to. This is not a special school. This is a ordinary private school in Denmark. It wasn't even expensive. There were 16 children in the classes, at most. That was when the class was full. There was a special class in that school that had, I think, 3 or 4 children. And they were socializing with all of the other students at that school freely. They were a part of the community. Everyone loved them. Even when they reacted outwardly, and that happened frequently, actually. But the entire school was supportive. Why? Because the school was a community. Every student in that school knew each other. Every student knew every teacher by name. And every student was made to feel that they had a place even when they acted out.
That sounds really great.
Yeah,
I mean, that sounds way better than my school, but
no, but see, this is one school, and it's definitely the best school that I've gone to. And I'm not saying that it's easy to create that. I'm saying that with the right environment, you can create that. With teachers that are well educated, motivated to do their job, have the time to do their job, and with an environment that is small enough but also has the space to create quiet rooms, or, you know, and I'm not saying there wasn't bullying. Like I was bullied at that school for a time period.
But I agree with everything. But I agree with everything that you're saying. But we're kind of a little bit talking besides the point, because what I am really trying to get at is that I think that social justice is only possible to be if the state should make sure that we have a socially just society. The only way we can do that is by identifying deficits and identifying problems and then fixing them. Right? That's the whole idea of, but I feel like now and lately what I'm hearing a lot is like, there is no problems, but we have to fix the problems. And I feel like that's exactly a little bit what so you're basically saying it's just traits, it's not really a problem. But
no, I'm not saying that it's not a challenge. I'm saying that it matters that it matters how we talk about the challenges.
Yeah, I feel like we're lying. We're basically acting as if it's not a problem to just not hurt anyone. But at the same time, we have to, behind closed doors, when it's about money, we have to say, yeah, but it is a problem. Like, yeah, we have the DSM, and yeah, actually it is a problem. But then in public, we talk like as if that's not a problem at all, to not hurt anyone's feelings. And I feel like that's kind of, I see where it's coming from. I see that we don't want to hurt people's feelings. I think that's noble. But at the same time, I feel like it's dishonest, and it's not really like doing justice to the problem.
I feel like it's a disconnect between the legal and the diagnostic language and the social language, like the everyday community-based language, right? So in legal terms and in diagnostic terms, things work this way because historically it has.
Also because we have to allocate money, right? We just talked about it. We have to, not only historically, we still have to right now. You've even said it yourself. You said, I know that things have to go that way, but I wish it wouldn't. So it's not even historically. It's like currently, practically, we have to do it that way, right?
But what I'm saying is it works that way now because it has in the past. Like it comes from
But
that
that
way of
would
thinking,
assume that you
and
have a solution right now that we could implement that would not work that way, right? Like when you say it's like that because it has always been like that, that sounds like it's like a legacy system that we've just continued to use because of tradition.
I feel like it is.
But that would assume that you have a better system, and I don't know. I don't have one. Do you have one?
Actually, my boss is currently talking to our government and has addressed them with a solution that
is
based
not
on what?
Sorry, go ahead. I thought you were done.
No, that's okay. So she actually made a treatment school, and it's been going for 10 years now. And the children that go to that school are the children that they've gone to normal schools, like public schools and whatnot, didn't work out. Then they've gone to special schools, that didn't work out. They've dropped out of the system practically entirely, and this is a ditch effort to get them to be a part of society at all. Like, last hope. Okay. What she's learned from that school in the last 10 years is that all the things that work to actually improve the lives of these students aren't the special education things, aren't the special accommodations that we talk about. It's simple and not very costly. And if we just did it from the get-go, kids wouldn't end up being that hurt in the first place. At least that's what she's come to believe. And I don't know. I don't know what her school looks like. The vision that she has for what all public schools should be like, I don't know in detail. But I have seen what she's done with the students at the school that she's run for 10 years. I have seen that.
Mm-hmm.
And if one of her main points, and this is something that I agree with completely, is that the one most healing factor, if we're talking about mental health in terms of quality of life, well-being, the single most healing factor is community.
I agree.
That's it.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure about it. I'm definitely sure that that's true. Okay, to maybe yeah, I don't know. I'm still a little bit. I have my difficulties with the concept.
I think that it's okay that we disagree on how to fix the issue, because it's
not. We don't disagree
really,
on how.
Really complex.
Wait. We don't disagree. No. We don't disagree on how we fix the issue. No, not really. Like I think we agree on how, like, all of the things that you have talked about in regards to solutions. I believe you, especially since you're way more educated on the topic than I am. But what I disagree with, what I vehemently disagree with, is that we have a social system that is based on defining and finding out the deficiencies and problems of society and try to fix them. That's what the whole idea of, I don't know, something like social democracy or like all of these systems basically do that. And I think that's a good thing. And I feel like with autism, what we're doing is basically saying it's a trait. It's not a disability. It's not a problem. But at the same time, okay, but you're saying, I don't know.
I'm not saying it's not difficult. I'm saying that I disagree with these specific word choices.
Yeah, I know, but Yeah, I know, and that's what I disagree with. I feel like we have to
Yeah.
be honest about it, especially since autistic people are not children. It's not like we have to be like careful on how we talk about it. I think we can be 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 open about what we think about it, and people will appreciate that.
Of course, but I'm not saying that there is no disability to talk about. I'm just saying that I don't think the disability resides in the person. I think the disability resides in the meeting between the person and the accommodations that aren't there.
Yeah, but that kind of, yeah, I see I see your point,
But
but
that distinction is important to me as a professional
yeah, but
and as a
then we get
person.
to this. Yeah, I agree with you. I understand your point, but that again gets to the point of, would society miss out on stuff if it would be perfectly accommodating for autistic people? So, for example, would society? I think society would miss out on some stuff if it would be perfectly. If the autism would not be detectable at all, like if all of the traits of autistic people would be indetectable in a society like that, I think would miss out on a few things. For example, just like simple stuff like certain social interactions, and also like group work, and certain sensor stuff that involves sensory overload. So obviously it's not going to apply to every autistic person, but like the single traits, if we look at the single traits and if we try to
Mm.
eradicate everything that could provoke a
Okay,
disability.
that's not what I'm saying should happen, though.
Mhm. I know that you're not saying that that should happen, but you're basically saying that the reason for it is that it's not within the way the it's not the trait that qualifies for a
Mhm.
disability, it's the
Mhm.
environment in which the trait
Yes, which is about where we
is.
place responsibility.
But
So if the disability resides in the person, then that's their problem, right?
if
And
you're
and
saying that someone who's not able to process a certain amount of sensory data, uh
I'm
yes.
I think the issue here is, where does the responsibility for accommodating the disability,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if it is that the disability resides in the person, then it is their problem to find the accommodations. If we acknowledge that the disability happens when the person meets society, and society has not made it possible for that person to be included, then it is society's responsibility to fix that.
Mm-hmm. I don't really see that. I mean, I don't really see that connection. I mean, disability just means not being able to do something, right? So like not having X.
That is how I perceive the meaning of the word itself,
Mm-hmm.
but how it is used and where it resides definitely to me changes the impact and the responsibility, um,
I mean,
as
don't you think?
understood by society and by theoreticians.
I think we have a responsibility to make society wheelchair accessible, and I don't think that.
I think we have a responsibility to make society accessible. Period.
Yeah, so we
Okay?
don't really need society to be to be responsible for the disability.
We
We
need
just.
society to be responsible for making accommodations to include every person.
Yes, but it
Society
doesn't
as
have
a
anything to do
whole.
with with who is causing the disability. And also, like, no one is causing disability. It's just
I
like,
mean, it's
if you're
genetics,
religious,
but
if
it's
you're religious, it's just God. If you're scientific, if it's genetics or whatever, like, it's not really
but it
like.
is but that's why it's so complex, is that it's not just what is autism? It's also, how does society work? How do people think? How have we been thinking about specific problems for the last 100 years? And how have we gotten to where we are now? Why are we making the choices we are? You know, there are so many layers to it that, I don't know, maybe maybe attending university um, messed up my thinking, but to me it matters why we are where we are, and where the responsibility for fixing problems
Mm-hmm.
lies. Um, I fundamentally am a democratic socialist.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it is the responsibility of society to make itself accessible as a system, as a whole. I don't believe that it is a single person's responsibility to fix their own problems or to find ways to include themselves in society.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I do think that as individuals, we have the responsibility to not hurt other people.
I agree
Like,
100%.
but it's, but if society is not accessible to you, you can't make that access point. Society has to bend and shape
Yes,
itself
but
to
all
include
of
you.
everything I agree, but everything you're saying also goes for for a person that sits in a wheelchair, and there we would
Yes.
obviously just say it's a disability. So none of it is a counter argument to me advocating for calling autism or certain types of certain forms of autism a disability. Like that's what I'm advocating for here, basically. So it's not really I get your like I hear you, like everything you're saying I agree with a lot, like, but I just advocate for I feel like our language around autism is not very real, especially in regards to people that are really suffering. I've heard and watched and talked also to people that are really suffering from autism, like that's the way they
Mm.
describe it,
Yeah.
and they say, and then I hear people say stuff like, "I wish there would be more autistic people," and I don't know. I know that I get where they're coming from, but it's
Mm.
not the reality for everyone. Like a lot of people are really suffering also from
Yeah.
a lot from
Of
autism,
course.
and
Me, my whole job is confronting suffering.
mhm,
so so I feel like I definitely see that.
yeah,
Um, it's just that
I feel like we have to acknowledge that suffering.
people's people's ways of using language to describe things differs from person to person. And in my job, I will approach a person's way of talking about themselves, about society, about autism, and I will, for the most part, go along with their narrative. But my job is also to challenge that narrative if it's increasing their suffering, right?
If the
And
narrative is increasing the suffering,
yeah, if their narrative, if their way of thinking about themselves and society and autism is increasing their suffering,
mm-hmm,
my job is to challenge that.
mm-hmm,
Like, can we think about things in a different way that cause less suffering? As well as, of course, very practically saying, okay, are there strategies easier, right? But it's also to talk about the way of thinking, and trying to help them reframe their self perception in a way that is less self demeaning.
mm-hmm,
And very often, what I see is that the suffering is connected to ways of thinking about autism, ways of thinking about themselves that puts the blame on them. There's also, of course, the other extreme in which all of the blame is put on the world and it is entirely that, and I'm never at fault. And that's a whole other discussion. But for me, I very often have to find ways for people to not think of themselves as fundamentally disabled, and rather to think of, okay, I do have these challenges, fair enough. How can we get around them? How
Mhm.
can we find ways to make it less challenging to live with not being very good at this particular skill or having this sensory processing difference? Um, or having trauma from being excluded or humiliated, bullied. How can we take the reality and move forward towards a life that looks better for you?
Unfortunately,
And
yeah.
yeah, that's more of a single person conversation with, with each person rather than a larger societal conversation, of course.